everybody, John12 back here again with another video, and I'm here with my official Marvel's Ant-Man movie review. Now, of course, it's officially out, so of course, if you've not seen the movie already, please go check it out and see it, because this review may contain spoilers, so if you don't want to have anything spoiled, because I will be talking about post-credit scenes and all the various details and comic book relations and all that various stuff in this review, so please, if you've not done so already, go check out Marvel's Ant-Man. It's an awesome flick. Then come back so we can talk shit about the movie. That being said, this movie's Marvel's Ant-Man was, I think, one of those movies that I never thought it was ever going to get made, and I never thought it was ever going to be good if it did get made, because there were so many problems that Marvel's Ant-Man had during its production, during its casting, during all the craziness that had, like, you know, like, oh, is it going to be a part of the MCU? It's not going to have Ultron. You know, it's not going to have various connections with Phase 2. Is it going to be part of Phase 3? Edgar Wright leaves. We have to find a new director. There's various writers. You know, it had a lot of various problems, or at least to me, where I saw and I was like, is this movie ever going to be good because of the various changes this movie went through? And it officially came out. And to be honest, because it's so different from what we got last time with Marvel, which was obviously Age of Ultron, it's just really awesome. It's really good, it's very fun, it's very entertaining. And if there's something that I've learned out of all of Phase 2, and I'm guessing from Phase 2 onward, everything that I've learned from Marvel is that everything that I expect to be amazing doesn't turn out to be as amazing as I want it to be, and everything I expect to be complete bullshit is probably the movie that I'm going to be looking forward to onward. You know, like, and that happened a lot with Phase 2. Like, I had high expectations for Iron Man 3, I did not get them. I didn't think Winter Soldier would be better than First Avenger, and it was freaking amazing, the best Captain America movie to date. And of course, I never thought Guardians of the Galaxy was amazing, and I was foolishly wrong. And I thought Age of Ultron was going to be, you know, the king of these Marvel movies, and as much as I still am entertained by that movie, and I still like a lot of tidbits about it, and I, you know, really enjoy Scarlet Witch and Vision, that movie obviously did not reach the expectation that I really wanted it for this movie. And this, of course, Marvel's Ant-Man, is another part of that Phase 2 Marvel syndrome that I've been going through, which is a movie that I expect to be complete bullshit, or at least don't expect it to be better than what's come before it, actually is better than anything else. I mean, of course, Marvel still hasn't hit, or at least had another hit that's as big as Guardians, because let's face it, unless like something humongous happens with, you know, in the writing room and production, I don't really see them surpassing themselves in the, you know, when it comes to topping Guardians of the Galaxy. But Ant-Man does a really good job at topping what happened prior in a good way. I mean, like, it's such a good smaller scale, no pun intended, of a big comic book movie, and it's just really awesome that way. But that being said, of course, the film is directed by Peyton Reed and is based on a screenplay written by Edgar Wright and Joe Cornish, and of course stars Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, Gillian Lilly, plays Hope Pym, who's obviously the daughter of the Wasp in the original Ant-Man, who's obviously, we don't know who she plays, but of course the original Ant-Man, who's Hank Pym, is obviously played by Michael Douglas, and of course we have Corey Stoll, who plays Yellow Jacket. And that's pretty much the cast, and of course you have various other cameos of really awesome people like Michael Pena, and so on and so forth. And Judy Greer is also in this film, who plays Paul Rudd's ex-wife / mother of his kid, which I thought was kind of hysterical that they casted her in that role. I don't know if anybody's realized this, but does anybody realize the fact that Judy has played in every big fucking movie over the course of the last 2 years as, like, either a wife or a mom? I just realized that. Like, she was in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, she played Caesar's wife. She was in freaking Jurassic World, she played the mom of those 2 bastard kids. And then now she's, like, you know, ex-wife of Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd? What the... how did that happen? Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Judy. She's awesome. I'm a fan, sure, but she's been in like 3 really huge, big box office movies, and she's played basically the same character in all of them. I don't know why. I just find that kind of odd. Well, anyways, let's move off of that and get into the premise / story of Ant-Man, and then I'm going to move on into the pros and cons of this film, and then giving my overall rating. But that being said, the overall story of Ant-Man essentially starts off with a 1989 flashback with Hank Pym talking with, S.H.I.E.L.D., essentially resigning from S.H.I.E.L.D., discussing, whether or not he's going to, give the world his technology. He believes that his technology is too dangerous for other people to tamper with, so obviously it creates a dangerous rift between him and the rest of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s agents of the time, which of course is, we get some cameos from Agent Carter and of course Howard Stark. So of course, if you're big fans of S.H.I.E.L.D. and various flashbacks of, references and cameos from various Marvel people, then of course you're going to enjoy that. But then we move off that and get to Real Time, which essentially this movie takes place several months after the events of Avengers Age of Ultron. It doesn't really say that specifically, but of course it's referenced when people are talking about because there's actually a specific tidbit where they discuss the Avengers and whether or not they should have the Avengers deal with the events of this movie. And essentially, I think it's actually Hank Pym who actually makes the reference of like, oh, they're too busy, like, making cities fall from the sky or something. So of course, they obviously reference that. And I also like the fact that Hank Pym doesn't like the Avengers and doesn't like Tony Stark or the Stark family and doesn't want anything to do with them. I really enjoyed that and thought that was funny. But moving off of that, Scott Lang, of course, is released from prison. He, has this humongous criminal record of being a cat burglar, and of course is estranged from his ex-wife and their new family, and of course his new daughter, who he obviously wants to be more involved with her life, and decides that he can't really make it on the real world without being a criminal. So he decides to essentially break into Hank Pym's house, without knowing it, and of course trying to break into his safe to possibly find some money that he can use for various causes, finding a job, finding his own apartment, various things like that, but then instead finds the Ant-Man suit. Steals the Ant-Man suit with Hank Pym actually allowing it, and of course discovering the fact that the suit has powers, and he has the ability at his own whim to shrink to the size of a literal ant. Then the movie actually kicks into high gear where Hank Pym kind of just brings Scott Lang into the whole scenario, introduces him to his daughter, who of course is Hope Van Dyne, or Hope Pym, whether, whichever name you want to go with. But that being said, she's obviously the daughter of the original Wasp, who they actually reference and kind of show in this movie. She basically looks kind of like just a rendition version of the Ant-Man suit, which I thought was kind of sad. I was hoping that, Marvel would have went, I guess, a little bit more comic booky with Wasp's outfit. But that being said, overall, I think it's just awesome that they had her in general. But that being said, Hank Pym has devised a specific plan that's, that deserves or needs the special abilities of Scott Lang, who's obviously very good at burglary and robbing and all that kind of various criminal activities. He wants to use that skill to essentially steal Cross's Yellow Jacket suit, which he believes that if Cross uses the Yellow Jacket and sells it to the military and sells it to, wink wink, spoilers, Hydra, who of course are businessmen now. Yeah, Hydra is not officially the organization that they were prior. Apparently now they're just businessmen. I'm surprised they're still alive after the events of Age of Ultron, but whatever, it is what it is. Essentially, he plans to sell them the Hydra so they can use it for military use, possibly to, fight against the Avengers, because if you've seen Age of Ultron, they kind of got fucked over. But that being, or of course, if you've seen anything that's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. related. But anyways, of course, Scott Lang kind of comes into it, starts his 80s montage of training, trying to learn how to fight with, Hope, try to use the Ant-Man suit with Hank, and of course try to, manipulate and technically, obviously use his, technology to have the ants do whatever, or the insects rather, because there's various insects, to do whatever he wants them to do. And of course, moving off of all these various plot twists, the movie's very predicated on the fact that it's a very father and mother, and specifically father and daughter relationship status, which is, I think, very interesting kind of point of view that they wanted to give both of the male leads in this movie, which is specifically Michael Douglas's Hank Pym, and of course Paul Rudd's Scott Lang. I thought it was pretty interesting that they did that, because overall in the entire premise of the movie, it's overlaid through with this plot line where, Hank Pym doesn't really want Hope to be involved in anything he's doing. Scott Lang wants to do everything for his daughter, and it's kind of like, and vice versa, as to their relationships kind of coexist with each other, where they obviously wanted the best for their daughters, but they don't want them to be in danger. And that's kind of like the overall gist of this movie. And I think it's really awesome that we get to see that kind of relationship evolve. Of course, it's a, double-edged sword, because it's a con that I have, but I'll talk about that later. But overall, I think it's really interesting plot device that they went with this movie, and it has a definitely really good payoff. It doesn't have it in the actual film itself, but it has to do with the post-credit scenes, which I'll get to in a minute. But that being said, moving off of that, Cross actually perfects the Yellow Jacket suit, and of course plans to use it, invites Pym and various other, Pym technology people to the event of the, of the year, which is essentially, the convergence of, I guess, Pym technologies to Cross technologies, whatever. Everyone wants a tech business, but whatever. And of course, Scott Lang and, the rest of Team Ant-Man, if you will, have this entire scheme to steal the Yellow Jacket that obviously, gets to, the entire plan comes to naught, obviously. Cross has pretty much everything planned. The movie ends with an obvious badass sequence of, Yellow Jacket versus Ant-Man. Everything starts going crazy. Amazing shit goes down. I don't want to go into too much spoiler territory if you've not seen it, but the ending battle is very small scale for Marvel standards, but it's a good thing. I think that was the best, great thing about it, is because you have characters that have special abilities that are specifically the power to shrink and nothing really else. It's not like Ant-Man has the ability to be super strong. I mean, of course, because of his small size, he retains the speed, I guess, and strength of a normal human being, which causes him to, I guess, in the way that Hope kind of explains it, makes him like a small bullet to a certain extent. So it really depends on how fast or strong he uses himself. But at the end of the day, they don't have like superhuman abilities, like Thor or what have you. But it was just interesting and continuously awesome throughout the third act of the film, which is specifically Yellow Jacket versus Ant-Man, to see their battle kind of continue to go on and on and on, and how it kind of ends, and like you get the feeling of like it's more or less technology that almost destroys Ant-Man than it does actually Yellow Jacket, which is another con I'll get into later. But overall, really awesome ending, really interesting and amazing, overall, battle between Yellow Jacket and Ant-Man, and just overall really badass movie. I really enjoyed the overall ending of the movie, although I don't really understand. I don't know. It's really interesting that it kind of ends with the fact that Falcon is trying to search for Scott. I don't know why. It just, I guess it has a lot to do with, Civil War, but overall that's pretty much the film's premise and story. But that's pretty much the end of the premise / story. It's a pretty interesting story that has a lot of... It's very simplistic in the way that it's kind of just be straightforward, comic book, comedic, superhero movie, but it has a lot of other kind of overlaying kind of story devices, where it's like you have this really interesting legacy character, and then you have this very, interesting relationship of father and daughter, and you know, how you have all these Avengers references, and then you have, you know, the overlaying of, you know, like, hey, we got to set up Civil War, and then, you know, it has a whole bunch of really interesting things. You have the, you know, the villain's point of view. You have all these other really amazing plot devices. But overall, let's get into the post-credit scenes. Now, thankfully, they decided to give us actually 2 post-credit scenes, which is awesome because we obviously did not get that in Age of Ultron. But that being said, spoilers from this point on, if you really don't know anything about the post-credit scenes, which I'm sure a lot of comic book fans at this point in time already do know. The mid-credit scene obviously is Hank and Hope discussing the fact that, you know, Hope does have a future in this kind of business. She, you know, this is, you know, the payoff that I was talking about, which is, of course, Hope getting the prototype. This is just a prototype, but it's very advanced, so of course they're definitely going to be working on it in future movies, which is obviously the new Wasp suit, which is really awesome. It's still not as badass as the comic book version. I personally think the Wasp in the comic books looks a lot more badass looking, but overall I can see why they had to change it for, you know, specific reasons. But overall, a really nice payoff throughout the movie. It's ready. It's this movie and this relationship is really predicated on the fact that Hank doesn't want Hope to be involved, and he doesn't believe in her. Over the course of the movie, he's learned to let his guard down, bring her in, and obviously believe in her. And it really doesn't have a payoff throughout the entire film, but it pays off here in this one mid-credit scene. It's really awesome. I really liked it. Really awesome the fact that, you know, she's eventually going to become the new Wasp. And I was really, you know, kind of scared about that because even though Evangeline Lilly, if I'm even pronouncing her name correctly, I hope I am, but, you know, she's obviously supposed to be the comic book, or at least in the context of this movie, the second Wasp. And I was really scared about that because I actually really enjoy the Wasp. You know, she's one of my favorite Marvel female superheroes, and I was kind of scared, like, oh shit, is she gonna, like, you know, she looks the part, but is she gonna be able to play the part? Because, you know, I don't want to be dealing with, you know, this whole daddy-issued Wasp, you know, throughout the entire movie. But of course, throughout the movie, she's not really the Wasp. She doesn't really become the Wasp until the exact point of this mid-credit scene. So I think it definitely has a payoff. It really was, you know, sketchy throughout the film as to whether or not it would pay off, but it definitely does in this one credit scene. So really kudos to them. And of course the post-credit scene is the most interesting, that has the most questions that I don't really understand. The hardcore comic book Marvel fans, please, in the comment section below, speculate and debate with me in the comment section if you please. But I really didn't understand what it meant. Maybe, you know, I know what it has to deal with, but I just don't understand what the exact context of the scene is, technically. But that being said, you can debate and speculate and, of course, answer it if you know the actual answer in the comments below. But, of course, the last post-credit, the second post-credit scene is, of course, Falcon, who obviously has a role in this movie, heavily, which surprised a lot of us. I mean, it doesn't really surprise a lot of us. I mean, like, he was in the freaking TV spot, so it's not really that big of a spoiler, but essentially he is back. They're back at the offices of, you know, Avengers offices, if you will. They're in the bowels of the Avengers. Anyways, they're essentially discussing what they're going to be doing. They have to not have Tony Stark have any kind of involvement with it, which of course is setting up the fact that Rogers and Stark are going to be butting heads with, you know, freaking, they're going to be, I'm telling you, it's going to be Iron Man versus Captain America, Iron Man v Cap next year, essentially. And they're not really going to be, you know, in same terms, because apparently Captain America has the Winter Soldier in custody in the bowels of the Avengers Tower, or, you know, offices, or whatever the hell they were at. They finally, because if you've seen the Winter Soldier, the movie, it was hinted at a specific, the end of the movie, where Falcon and Cap actually go off to try and find Bucky and bring him back in. So, of course, you know, at some point, Steve Rogers can I guess, bring back Bucky from the grave, if you will, out of, you know, this persona that is the Winter Soldier, and they finally accomplished it. Winter Soldier is in the bowels of the Avengers. He's obviously in custody. Captain America is doing something to him. I don't know, wink, some creepy shit, I don't fucking know. But that being said, they discuss what are they going to do next, what is the next move, and he obviously has to reference Tony Stark because Civil War is right around the corner. It's obviously the next Marvel movie, a part of Phase 3. And obviously, Falcon states that he knows who to contact. I have no idea what this is, pertaining to. Let me know in the comment section below who he's specifically talking about or what that scene even means. I know it has a lot to do with something Civil War. I just don't know exactly. But obviously, in the comment section below, let me know. But that being said, overall, I like this movie. It's not really... I don't think it's the greatest Marvel movie today, but it's definitely really freaking good, and I really enjoyed it. I had an amazing, entertaining time. It was definitely, and even though it's kind of a gripe I have with it, the great thing about it is that it's a comedy that's just ironically a superhero comic book movie. That's the great thing about it. It's just a straight up, it has this really good element of sci-fi tech, because of all the technology, but it's mostly just like, if you went to the theaters to see like a Paul Rudd comedy that just freaking so happens to be a superhero comic book movie, which I thought was pretty badass and entertaining. But overall, if I had to rate this movie, I give it a good, as of right now, an 8.5 out of 10. I think that's a pretty decent rating for a movie that I really had no really high expectations, but really broke them and really made a good standard. For me personally, at this exact point in time, I think it's actually my favorite comic book movie out of the year. Out of freaking 2015 so far. I thought it was pretty freaking awesome and badass. But that being said, it really depends on what you personally think. Let me know in the comment section below what your personal favorite comic book movie is out of the year. But if I had to consider like all the Marvel stuff, then I don't know. I'm just saying, like, as much as I was entertained by Age of Ultron, I like Ant-Man a little bit better for some reason. It just feels better. It has a better flow. It's built and constructed a lot better. I don't know. I guess it's because it doesn't like overbear you with a lot of conflicting, references and cameos from various Avengers people. Like the biggest actual conflicting cameo you get is essentially a battle with Falcon, which I still kind of don't understand. I mean, I understand that Falcon is like, I guess, head of security over at the Avengers offices or whatever. But why is he fighting Ant-Man? I didn't really get that, but at this point in time, everything is on high alert because Civil War is around the corner, superheroes fighting each other. Oh shit, that's something that audiences are going to have to get used to. I'm just saying, 2016 is going to be the year of superheroes kicking each other's asses. I'm just saying, it's going to be Iron Man v. Captain America. You got fucking Batman v. Superman. What's next? Shit's going to go down. I want to see it. But that being said, it's definitely a hard pill to swallow, if you will, depending on your personal preference and subjective opinion. But that being said, I liked the movie. It was entertaining. I give it an 8.5. But that being said, let's get into the cons I had with the movie. Essentially, the main conflicting storyline that's consistent in this movie that I had a problem with is actually the father-daughter relationships. I understand what this movie's trying to do with the mother and daughter and freaking father and daughter whole kind of scenario where it's like, Hope wants to understand the truth behind her mother's death. Obviously Hank doesn't want to tell her, and then you have Paul Rudd who's obviously trying to do everything he wants for his daughter but keeps fucking up. It's a consistent storyline, and I understand why they went that route. They obviously wanted to make these relationships stand out. But I just felt like they were very overbearing. I'm not saying they sucked, and I didn't say, like, at the end of the day, I was like, fuck the daughters, I don't care. I want to see fucking superpowers and fucking heroes with suits and capes. And, I'm not saying that. I liked it, but I'm just saying, like, it was just very overbearing for me. And I just felt like they could have dealt with, if they cut, like, half of that out, I felt like it would have been a little better. Moving off of that, the animation's really awesome. The special effects and CG are freaking badass. The suit looks amazing. The Ant-Man suit is awesome. It definitely feels like a good redesign from the comic book version. I really love the fact that they made both the Ant-Man and Wasp in this universe, in the context of this movie, a legacy character, because we never had that in the MCU before. I mean, obviously comic books are very illogical, but they're obviously known both in Marvel and DC for having legacies to certain characters. And Ant-Man and the Wasp, they definitely do that in the context of this movie, where they had Wasp and Ant-Man be legacy characters where other people can come out of the woodworks and essentially don the persona of Ant-Man and don the persona of the Wasp. It's just a really interesting thing that the MCU hasn't really touched upon yet, and I think it was just awesome, and it was a really good payoff in this movie. Moving off of that, I don't know why, but I think the fact that they had so many different writers come in and change this movie, there's a lot of conflicting things that this movie is really hard to understand because it's trying to do too many things at once. Like, it's trying to be sci-fi, it's trying to be a comedy, it's trying to be a superhero movie, it's trying to be like a Paul Rudd movie, and I got that big feeling over the course of the movie, and it stands out very hard. You can see it very specifically, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they had so many writers. I mean, obviously, I don't know specifically how much they had of Edgar Wright and Joe Cornish's screenplay for the movie. I don't know if they really used that, but obviously they had Adam McKay and even Paul Rudd come back and rewrite the movie, so I don't know exactly how much they used from the original screenplay into the new movie, but it really stands out where you can actually see a lot of Edgar Wright-esque kind of moments in this movie, and you can see a lot of Paul Rudd moments and you can see Adam McKay moments, and there's just a lot of specific things that kind of break it for me as to just make this movie one person's movie. Why does it have to be like 10,000 different writers' movies? And I have that problem. I really don't like when a movie has various different writers. And another interesting thing is that Edgar Wright and Joe Cornish have multiple credits in this movie. And we already know that they didn't really have a lot to do with this movie after Edgar Wright left. So I don't know how much they had left to do with this. Marvel obviously had the courtesy of leaving them their credits, whether it be like based, story, screenplay by executive producers. But were they really, prevalent in this movie? I don't know. I really want to know that answer, because this movie felt like, it's obviously Peyton Reed's movie, but they had a whole bunch of other things that kind of conflict with that. Like, you have oh, this is Paul Rudd's movie. Oh no, this is Edgar Wright's movie from the grave. Whose movie is this exactly? That's kind of like the problem I have over the course of this film. That doesn't really overbear with a lot of other things because of how great the movie is overall and how great the performances are. And we have really awesome performances. I mean, Michael Douglas is one of my favorite parts of this movie. Evangeline Lilly, she's always fucking awesome. She's, great in pretty much everything she does. She's a great actress. Even though I'm not really big on the whole, daddy problem kind of shit that, female characters have. I'm not really big on that. Overall, she still killed it. Paul Rudd, surprisingly, is awesome as the main lead in a freaking superhero comic book movie. I don't know if I would ever say that back in the day, but I'm in the world now that Paul Rudd is now a superhero. I don't know how that fucking happened, but he surprisingly does a pretty decent job at it, so kudos to him. Michael Pena was hysterical. I think he's like the funniest, best part of this movie. Everyone else just does a pretty decent, awesome job, but the standouts are obviously the three main stars. Obviously, it's Paul Rudd, Evangeline, and Michael Douglas's movie. That's their movie. They play the main characters. They are the Ant-Men, and of course the Wasp. They're freaking awesome in it, and I love the fact that they really used them to their full potential, and they really played ball, because I really get the feeling that, they wouldn't have been in this kind of a movie before. And because it's so smaller scale in comparison to the regular Marvel events, it just felt like a much more special kind of an event movie. And I really enjoyed that. That's really a great choice to make this, because Ant-Man has a lot of really amazing stories that conflict with the Avengers. And they decided just to scrap that and make it its own standalone movie, but of course still in the context of the MCU universe. But I think it serves the purpose of being an Ant-Man movie by being separate from the Avengers, which is why I like the references of those Avengers, they're just busy making cities fall from the sky, and, Tony Stark, we don't need that asshole in this fucking movie. I like those kind of references, and the fact that, Howard and Hank had this whole real big debacle against each other, and, the fact that Hank was originally the Ant-Man and used to be, doing stuff for the government and S.H.I.E.L.D. as the persona of Ant-Man, and the fact there was a Wasp, and and the fact that there maybe was an Avengers before the Avengers. Like, that's a really interesting, awesome, badass thing, which goes into the story point of legacy, which I really liked about this movie. But overall, I love this movie. It was very entertaining, very fun. Definitely my favorite Marvel movie of the year and comic book movie of the year. I love Paul Rudd's performance. Peyton Reed, I think, did an awesome job replacing Edgar Wright. I still would have liked to have seen Edgar Wright direct this movie, as a lot of people would, but I think Peyton Reed did a good job as to what he was asked for. Evangelion kills it as the new Wasp / Hope, although, I'm still not big on the, daddy problems girl kind of thing. Yellow Jacket is where I come to terms as to the big problem in the room, which is, of course, he's the main villain of this movie, but I never really felt he was the main villain, which is kind of a consistent problem I have with main villains in Marvel movies. I mean, I'm not going to be the guy to say, like, oh, Marvel doesn't have good villains. They do have good villains, they just aren't really perfectly used in these comic book movies. I mean, they do amazing jobs with the heroes, but when it comes to the villains, it's like, if you're not Tom Hiddleston, it's like, who gives a shit who you are? And I kind of have that problem with Yellow Jacket. I mean, I never felt, over the course of this movie, that Yellow Jacket was going to win, or he was going to beat Scott. I never felt that, and I just felt like, and I don't know if it's correct or not, anybody can, speculate and debunk this, but does anybody feel like Corey Stoll, or the MCU's version of Darren Cross / Yellow Jacket, was essentially just a ripoff of Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor from Smallville? I don't know why, but every time I saw this fucking guy on screen and see him talk and saw him, like, interact with Hank and all the various characters, all I kept seeing was, I didn't see Yellow Jacket, I saw Lex Luthor from Smallville. That's all I fucking saw. And that was, like, a real problem I had. I mean, like, I get it that, he was supposed to be this menacing, like, super, billionaire protege from Hank Pym of, the movie and whatever. He wants to use the Ant-Man technology to destroy the world and sell it to Hydra and whatever the fuck. But I don't know why. He just felt like Rosenbaum Lex Luthor. That's how he felt to me. And that's kind of like a major problem I have with his character. And plus that the fact that he kind of gets killed relatively kind of easy. But anyways, that being said, that's pretty much Yellow Jacket for you. Wasn't big on him, but I can see he had his moments, but overall, he wasn't really my favorite, villain. But that being said, everyone else killed it. I just love this movie. It's a very good, entertaining, fun, comic book Marvel movie, and that's what the purpose it's supposed to serve, and it definitely served it. The post-credit scenes were great. Certain story points I definitely had problems with, and obviously the whole conflicting father and daughter relationships got to be very overbearing and annoying at some points, and certain character arcs you could have just cut out and just kept it to specifically, like, if this movie just stuck to Wasp, Ant-Man, and Michael Douglas throughout the entire movie, I would have felt better. It's like, I get it, people are gonna love those, father-daughter moments, and a lot of kids in the theaters did. I mean, like, every time something would happen, it's like, no, daddy, it's like, people went like, aw, I get that, it's supposed to happen, I understand that, but if you cut that out of the movie, I would have been like, fuck yeah, because all I want to see is Ant-Man shrink, kick some ass. I want to see fucking Michael Douglas kick ass because he's fucking Michael Douglas. And I want to see the Wasp in an actual suit, other than that freaking business suit that she wore throughout the entire movie. That's what I want to see. Hell, I'll even freaking deal with some more Michael Pena fucking moments because they're awesome. Instead of like, like the kid with problems and she wants her debt. I don't know. It's something that's special for certain people, but for me, at this point in time in period of this context, I'm just not really big on. But that being said, overall, it doesn't destroy the movie. It doesn't destroy the context of the movie. It does not destroy the continuity of Marvel films. They're obviously awesome and badass and fun and colorful and great to look and watch. So overall, it serves its purpose, and I purposely and ironically enjoyed the hell out of it. So let me know what you personally thought about Marvel's Ant-Man in the comment section below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you meh about it? What are your personal thoughts on all the characters and the future of Ant-Man onward? We already know that Paul Rudd Ant-Man will be making a cameo in Marvel's Civil War. So definitely kudos to that. We'll definitely be seeing Ant-Man again. There's been hints at the fact that we will be getting future Ant-Man sequels, so we'll definitely see that. And of course, Kevin Feige has referenced the fact that we will be seeing Wasp, or at least the Evangeline Lilly version of Wasp, in future Marvel movies. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I can't wait to see. Speculate below what the post-credit scenes mean. I know what the Wasp scene means, and I know that the other one is Civil War related. I just don't understand who they're referencing. And also, before I end this, before I get to my shameless plugs, we also do kind of get a Spider-Man reference in this movie. Yes, in fact, we do get a Spider-Man reference during the spoilers. During the end of the movie, and this is my only, Easter egg of Spider-Man. They didn't really be like, hey, it's Spider-Man, he's here. They didn't really do that. I don't see that happening until Civil War. But we do get a reference, an Easter egg to Spider-Man out of word of mouth. During the end of the movie, when Michael Pena's character is talking to Paul Rudd about the fact that Falcon is on the lookout and trying to find him, which I don't really understand why. He starts. Falcon is sitting in a bench next to this girl, and she references the fact that she knows various superhero characters, and there's even one that can, sling, skyscrapers or whatever, and can climb on walls or something, which is a tongue-in-cheek reference to Spider-Man. So that's pretty much the only real Spider-Man reference we have at this point. It could be debunked as not a Spider-Man reference. It really depends on your personal speculation, but I personally see it as a Spider-Man reference. It's a really good tongue-in-cheek one, not to be straight up oh, we know Peter Parker. And it's no, it's not like that, because obviously at this point in time, as Kevin Feige says it, Spider-Man's around, but he's early in his game. He's still a teenager, he's still doing his high school thing, and he's obviously, he's a bad boy. That's essentially the purpose of Peter Parker / Spider-Man in this universe, so we won't see him be, Avengers action until possibly Civil War and onward. But that being said, let me know what you personally think about that in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, and I hope you guys enjoyed. This has been John 12.